you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Deku Meets Devilmaycry in MHA. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Speckters on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Many years ago, inside an old mansion house, at night, a tragic event occurred. A mother yelled to her child to run. Run as fast as he could run. Run away from them. Alexander, run now. The mother was then cat down and fell to the floor, flowing all red. Mother. The adversaries were monstrous creatures, demons, their eyes burning red and haunting the young boy's mind. The shock from seeing his mother fall again made the young boy wake up from his nightmare to his now older and more mature self, sitting seat on a passenger plane. His hair was black and eyes red. He wore a long coat with gray upper body, but mainly red below the waist and sleeves. His breathe were jeans and wore combat boots. This young man was Alexander Kowalczyk, born in Russia, age 17. However, Alexander was no normal young man. 2,000 years ago, a gate leading into the underworld appeared and demons came pouring out into the human realm. Luckily for humanity, one demon decided to turn on its own kind and side with the humans. A demon known as Kine, the legendary Dark Lord. After a long struggle, the demon Lord Kine defeated all the other lords of the underworld that had come to the human world, sealed away the Dark Gate, and saved mankind. For centuries Lord Kine wandered the new realm until he eventually found love in a human woman named Beatrice. Their union then soon after produced offspring. The unholy union between demon and human gave BRTH to something new. Not human or demon, but something in between. Alexander was the son of the demon, Lord Kine. However, all was not perfect, as demons then found another way into the human world yet again. Nearly 9 years ago, Alexander saw his mother get killed by demons in their home. He managed to escape, but the other members of his family were not so lucky. Alexander looked out of the window to see that it was night time and the lights in the cabin were also dimmed down. Boop, voice then came over the loudspeaker. We are about to reach our destination, dear passengers, and will be arriving in Musutafu Airport within the next 30 minutes or so. We recommend gathering your belongings now to make sure you remember once we touch ground. Thank you for choosing us for your travel, it said. The young half-demon looked outside again and looked down on the dark landscape below that had dozens of lights shining from the cities and towns as the light was reflected on the asphalt up. He was nearly there. Later around midnight, Alexander arrived at the airport and exited with 2 big duffel bags. He quickly found a taxi and drove for an hour or two until he came to a neighborhood in a place called Musutafu. The taxi came around the corner and Alexander saw the person he was supposed to meet. Outside on the sidewalk stood a woman in her 40s waiting patiently for him to exit the cab. She wore a black business suit that was also became a skirt with a tie, high heels and tight gloves. Her hair was short and black and her eyes brown. This was Miss Calhoun, Alexander's contact, handler and friend. Once Alexander got out of the cab, he greeted her with a small smile. Miss Calhoun, long time no see. Good to see you again, Alexander. She happily greeted back. I hope the trip wasn't too terribly long. Nah, nothing to worry about, though that horror movie they showed was pretty boring. Alexander reassured her in his own way. By the way, Alexander, your Japanese is very good. You must have done quite the homework, Miss Calhoun said. Figure it would help if I started to listen to Japanese TV with and without subtitles so I could learn quicker. Turns out it worked, Alexander explained. I have heard that's an excellent way of doing it. But we are on a tight schedule. Mind if we head up now? Miss Calhoun asked. Lead the way. He waved his hand to his side. Follow me, Miss Calhoun responded. The two entered an apartment building, walked up a staircase to the right floor. Miss Calhoun and the young half-demon walked past a few apartment homes until they arrived at the right one. The apartment they entered had white walls and all the furniture a person would need, especially the big flat-screen plasma TV. Alexander placed his bags on the sofa. "Weren't the boards supposed to be here?" he asked. Miss Calhoun then pointed to a camera that sat on top the plasma screen TV. "Figures," he said, and then sat down on the sofa. The TV then turned on by itself. The screen depicted a black room, a big table, and several people sitting around it. There was a light behind them, so you could see the outline of the people sitting down. This was the board of people overseeing the organization called Demonic Response Team, DRT, or better known as Darta. Just as the name suggests, Darta is an organization with sole purpose of taking care of demons invading the human world, though they also sometimes deal with other paranormal problems from time to time. Darta is the successor of the original organization of demon hunters that was formed after the Dark Lord Kynes sealed the gate to the underworld and have been working in secret to keep the world safe from demonic harm. Back then it was more of a brotherhood, but now it was Black Ops classified hush-hush only group. Darta found Alexander when he was young and decided to train him to be a demon hunter. Since then, Alexander had become their best demon hunter thanks to his unique heritage. "Alexander, we see you made it." The one at the far end side of the table. This member was known as the director. "Wasn't so bad," Alexander explained. "Have to admit, this idea of yours have me little intrigued. Joining something called the hero course is a little wired, if not a little ironic." "It was the best we could do," the director said. "The son of a demon can be difficult, we understand. But this is the perfect way to keep yourself up. The hero course can give you financial support until you become a professional hero, so you can later support yourself, or you become a sidekick at least. They were kind enough to temporarily give you this place to stay while you wait for the entrance exam. And should you succeed, it's yours until you graduate. You remember why we gave you this opportunity?" he asked Alexander. "It's about that fire in that warehouse, right?" Alexander asked. "By the warehouse, you for course mean all the buildings you accidentally destroyed," the director explained. "Rebuilding you messes put a strain on the wallet, so to speak." "So, what is this place?" "This high. I don't normally follow the news," Alexander said. High is a school for training young people to eventually become heroes. In today's society where nearly anyone can sneeze fire, the government have made so that heroes now have become a part of everyday life, and those said heroes need a license to use their power in the defense of the people, mainly in dealing with those who use their quirks for their own gain. Your job is to become a pro-hero as a front for your paranormal activities. This way you can still do what you do best, and don't have to readjust much, except, well, not kill you targets while being a hero. We will give Miss Calhoun the necessary info when we have the next mission for you. In the meantime, you get ready of the entrance exam. We got you recommended. However, since they were not satisfied with the fake grades and info we made for you, you still have to complete it. If you fail, they stop supporting you and send you back to Moscow. If that happens, well, we don't think you would be happy being a police officer or even worse, a freeder. We trust you can get in no problem," the director said. Alexander chuckled. "Don't worry, I'll make it into this school. So where are the papers on my new identity?" "Miss Calhoun, please hand him the documents," the director said through the TV, and Miss Calhoun walked over and handed Alexander several documents. "Do your best to memorize all the information there is before you start attending UA, and also, please do not make any unnecessary property damage for as long as possible." "Why, boss? Why would I ever do that?" Alexander joked. Several board members on screen could be heard sighing as strong as possible. "Have a good day, Alexander," the director said. The screen then shot off and Alexander turned to Miss Calhoun. "So where are all my toys?" he asked, referring to his guns and blades. "They are placed in the closet behind you," Miss Calhoun explained. "Now excuse me, I'll be on my way. Good luck with the entrance exam. And try not to ruin this place like your previous home in Moscow." "Thank you, Miss Calhoun. See you later." Alexander said his goodbye as she went out the door again. All right, time for a little nap, Alexander thought. Hours later, the sun came over the horizon and light shined into Alexander's new home. He himself had just got back after going out to get a cheeseburger at the local fast food joint just down the road. Luckily, Darta had given him some money so he could eat. Alexander sat down on the couch again and began skimming through the documents that Darta had given him. Name, Alexander Kowalczyk. Well, at least they kept my name, he said to himself. Age, 16 inches makes sense since those joining are mostly 15 years old, though I am 17 in reality. Nationality, Russian, seems right. Graduated Mankov School, never heard of it. Quirk, oh, what did they pick? MSTR Rogue. MSTR Rogue? Wow, really? Guess it's better than nothing. It seems that this time Darta had made his new identity closer to his real one. Skimming some more, he then said to himself, Gee, how much more do I need to go through? He asked and looked down, saw there were way more written down than he had original thought. Alexander sat still for a moment before looking at his meal. He might need another burger for this. Later, Alexander got into the bedroom and unpacking his stuff. He pulled out all his clothing and put on the bed, and then immediately got bored. He then looked out the window. Taking a stroll around the city could be fun, he thought. Alexander walked out to the door leading out and grabbed his coat. The streets of Musutafu were filled with life. Vendors started opening up their stores. Kids and older students were getting on the bus to school. And of course, cars getting stuck in traffic, just like back home. As Alexander was walking down the street rubbing his amulet he had on a wire around his neck. The amulet was a gift from his mother. It was the shape of sword pointing down. Whenever demons were nearby, it would glow with green light. Its radius was decent, and it would glow more intensely the closer he got to a demon. Normally, he would not go around with his gear with him, but it would raise unnecessary attention since this Musutafu city was known to be a hot spot for hero and villain activity, and a guy with a big sword usually wasn't something you saw every day. But as of right now, his amulet did not glow at all, which meant no demons at least, and that was just fine with him. He actually took his time to take in the new surroundings. Alexander saw many people around who either had a quirk that deformed their appearance or getting a limb from an animal. It was wired to think that around 80% of the world's population had an ability unique them. Though he himself did not have a quirk, he was the son of a demon after all, which gave him a lot of abilities. But it was more believable for people to think he had one. Really, the only people who knew of his true nature were all members of Darta. Alexander then walked into an alley leading into another part of the city, but he stopped once he saw a group of people gathered around what looked like a young couple. Just his luck. If it's not one thing, it's the other. A gang had surrounded a young frightened couple and they planned on robbing them. The gang consisted of around 5 members, and they all wore LTHR jackets with torn-off sleeves. Their boss walked towards the young couple. Empty your wallets now, and we'll be quick, he threatened. The man of the couple said to the boss of the gang, Please, I don't have my wallet on me at the moment. Leave us alone. But the boss didn't care for such a useless pled. Then we just have to take whatever the lady has on her. He pointed at the young girl's purse. No, please, she begged. Leave her out of this, the young man of the couple said. But as soon as he did, long stretchy fingers came wrapped themselves him so he was unable to move. It was from one of the gang members. Hey, what gives? So the strong way it is. You should just have stayed still and let us take what we wanted. But now we have to hurt you, the gang leader said, and his left fist and it getting covered in stone. That was the gang leader's quirk. The eyes on the young couple were getting wide as the gang leader was making his way over towards them. I would advise against that if I were you. A voice came from behind the gang. They turned to see a kid in his late teens come walking towards them. Who the heck are you? The leader asked. Alexander grinned. Me? My name is unimportant. But what is important is I want you to stop harassing those two. Huh? And if we don't stop? The gang boss then asked. Alexander cracked his knuckles and smiled. Then I am afraid that I need to beat you, so you'll be unconscious for the rest of the day. The gang of quirk users were quiet for a moment before bursting into laughter. Ha ha ha, the leader laughed. And just what are you supposed to do against us exactly? And there's my quest, Alexander said. Alexander then looked down to see a stone the size of a normal person's hand. Alexander then stomped on the ground, and the shock sent the stone upwards so it arrived at his eye height. Alexander then proceeded by extending his right arm to flick the stone with his point finger and index finger. The result was that the stone was then sent flying at high speed towards the thug holding down the man of the couple. The stone hit the thug so strong in the face that the thug was then sent into the wall behind him and was knocked out in the process. The gang was startled to see the incredible feat the stranger just pulled off. The leader pulled himself together and yelled to his gang, "Take him out." The closet member of the gang ran towards Alexander. His quirk was he could channel light into his fist so it could be used to punch down walls. But as he tried to take a swing at Alexander, Alexander ducked and grabbed his left leg. "Hey, what the?" the gang member said, now hang upside down. But before the gang member tired to get free from Alexander's grip, the two other, and last members not counting the leader, jumped towards Alexander, channeling their quirks ice and mud gathering. Alexander noticed the two come jumping at him and then had the genius idea of using the gang member he held as improvised weapon. Alexander waited for the two members to get close enough, and then he swatted all three thugs together, and they in turn fell to the ground grunting in massive pain. The leader was now furious and charged at Alexander, his fist covered in rock. "BSTRD, you are messing with the wrong man," he said and tried punching Alexander. However, Alexander caught his fist and then after slowly lowered it until the gang leader felt intense pain. "There, doesn't feel nice?" Alexander said with a sinister smile. The gang leader was about to retort when Alexander used his demon power to make his iris and his eyes glow menacingly red, all while he slowly applied more force and began tightening his hand around the gang leaders. The gang leader started to feel more frightened by the second. Soon the gang leader started shaking in fear and lost the will to fight. "Listen to me carefully now. You and your band of morons get out off here, before I show what human puppet looks like. You understand me?" Alexander threatened with a smile on his face. The frightened gang leader nodded, and Alexander let go of his hand. The gang leader started running away in fear, while the other gang members started following right after, one carrying the first one Alexander knocked out. Alexander had forgotten what it was like to fight normal people. Usually when he fought demons they wouldn't normally back down from a fight. Okay, maybe some of the really small ones. But when it came to humans, depending if they were thugs at least, they would always run away after he roughed them up a bit, so to speak. The young couple walked up to Alexander to say their thanks. "Really appreciate it, friend. Those thugs would have done terrible things to us if you hadn't shown up," the man said. The woman also showed her appreciation. "Thank you so much," she bowed. "No problem," Alexander said, giving them the thumbs up. "Couldn't let trash like that walk away unpunished." "Again, thank you, stranger. We'll head to the nearest hero agency and report them," the man told Alexander. Alexander moved out the way of the young couple and gestured with his arms and open palms to go past. "Be my guest," Alexander said. After the young couple left, Alexander stood for a moment taking in what he just did. So, this what a pro hero did every day. It was a lot less bloody than what he was used to. But that wasn't all. From what he did know, some people did have insane quirks that allowed them to do things that were way outside normal human limits. Especially the hero named All Might, world's #1 hero or something. The guy was said to change weather by using nearly 100% of his power into a punch. Alexander himself had taken care of extremely strong demons in the past. But a guy like All Might would be a strong challenge. All Might was no pushover, that was clear as day. But then again, Alexander wasn't a pushover either. He then left the ally and walked back to his new home. Days later, it was time. Alexander stood in front of 4 big glass buildings connected with a few walkways. A big modern wall surrounded it to keep out any unwanted guest. There was a nice small brick road leading up to an equally small staircase leading to the doors of the Yua busts ran parallel to the brick road, displaying heroes that probably graduated in the past. Alexander wore his usual gray-red trench coat, having a big duffel bag on his back. Inside it was his long broad sword, detailed with square engravings on it, and had dark fantasy, gothic design. Unfortunately, he kept his dual pistols at home along with his other weapons. Alexander was about to walk into the building. He spotted a girl with brown hair standing next to a boy around the same age, but had green hair instead. The boy looked like he was floating in the air somehow. The young girl grabbed onto the boy, placed him on the ground. "Sorry, I should have asked you before using my quirk. But I think you wouldn't mind me catching you," the girl said. But the boy didn't respond for some reason, and had widened eyes. "Isn't nerve-wracking?" she then asked, and the boy stammered to try to form words in his mouth, but it failed. "Well, I guess I see you inside. Bye," she said, and walked inside the door to UA, leaving the boy. The green-haired then started laughing nervously, like he had never talked to a person of the opposite gender before. Everyone around him were sweating in confusion. Alexander turned his attention away from the boy, walked inside. "Wonder what his deal is," he pondered. Little did he know that young boy had his heart set on becoming the greatest hero the world had ever seen. His name was Izukumidoriya. Izukumidoriya, once a quirkless nobody, but he was always determined to become a hero and save people with a smile on his face, even if the world did not agree with him. However, months ago his life changed forever. A villain had taken him hostage and was ready to kill him when he was saved by the #1 hero himself, All Might. After another encounter with the same villain, Midoriya inspired All Might into action after Midoriya tried to save one of his own childhood bullies that got snatched by the villain. After that, All Might told Midoriya of his quirk, One for All. Unlike regular quirks, One for All could be passed down to others like a flaming torch. "Young man, you too can become a hero." Those were the words from the hero that echoed in his mind. All Might himself was not the man he used to be after a fatal battle with a powerful villain, so much so that All Might could only hold his superhero form for 3 hours. The rest of the time, All Might was reduced to a very fragile man with thin limbs and a third of his original size. Sometimes he would spit out blood due to the injury he took. Midoriya accepted happily with teary eyes, and over the next few months, All Might personally trained Midoriya to ready his body for the quirk. Giving everything, he had Midoriya even manage to surpass All Might's expectations. And early morning on the same day as the exam, All Might passed to Midoriya the legendary quirk, One for All, which for some reason required Midoriya to shallow a part of his DNA. A strain of hair of all things. Now was going to become a hero, like so many others. This is where his destiny would begin. A high school. As for now, the two young men were on the verge of crossing paths with one another. The son of the legendary Dark Lord Kind, and the chosen successor of All Might himself. A few minutes later, inside the exam orientation hall. It was dark inside the room until suddenly lights turned on, illuminating the podium where a man stood wearing biker clothing and an electronic device around his neck. The screen behind him also lit up, showing the school's logo, which was standing on a U. The attendees sat on 3 rows of seats overlooking the podium. "What's up, you? Candidates? Thanks for tuning in to me, your school DJ. Come on, let me hear ya." He tried rallying the crowd, but no one said a word. It appeared to be that the man was little annoyed that none went on board his hype train, so to speak. "Keeping it mellow, huh? That's fine, I'll get straight to the main show. Let's talk about how this practical is going to go down. Are you ready, Yi?" He tried rallying crowd again, but was met with the same silence as before. Alexander sat of the row to the left when you enter the room and put his duffel bag between his legs. The Izukumidoriya, the boy from before, sat in the middle row, was currently fanboying over seeing the man on the podium, who was the hero known as Present Mike. The boy next to Izuku was named Bakugou. The short story was that Bakugou was Midoriya's bully, but after Midoriya risked his life to try and save him from a wired slime villain, he had mostly ignored him. He felt humiliated after being saved by his own standards, a little useless dweeb. The hero on the podium, Present Mike, began talking again. "Like your application said, today you rocking boys and girls will be out committing in mock battles in an urban settings. After I drop the mic here, you'll head to your specified battle centers." Everyone looked at their own card they had been given. The information on the card gave them the location they had to go to. The blonde boy, Bakugou, said, "I see. They are splitting up, so we can't work with any of our friends." Midoriya looked at his own card, noticed what Bakugou was taking about. "Oh yeah, our number are right next to each other, but we are assigned to different battle centers," he observed. However, Bakugou didn't like the way Midoriya was glaring his card. "Get your eyes off my card." He threatened to Midoriya move a centimeter away from him in fear. "DMN, I was looking really forward to crushing you," he muttered under his breath, but Midoriya could still hear it and felt very unsafe about it. Luckily for Alexander, Darta's board leaders had faked the written test he was supposed to take, and he could only grin whenever he thought about it. The pro hero present Mike then went on to explain the rules for the mock battle. The rules were to basically take down as many robotic enemies as possible. There were 3 types of enemies. One gave 1 point, another gave 2 points, and yet another gave 3 points. Other rules were that not at any point were you allowed to attack other students. Suddenly from the crowd, a tall young man stood up on his feet and raised an arm. "Excuse me, sir, but I have a question." "Hit me," Present Mike yelled, and a spotlight focused in on the tall young man. The young wore a yellow business suit and glasses. His hair was a sort of very dark blue or raven black. On the printout, you listed 4 types of villains, not 3. With all respect, if this is an error on official materials, it is shameful. We are exemplary students. We expect the best from Japan's most noteworthy school. A mistake such as this won't do. He obviously took the whole entrance exam very serious. If you waited for a bit, they might have gotten to it eventually, Alexander thought. That guy seemed way too uptight for him. The tall young man then turned around and pointed at Midoriya. "Additionally, you with the unkempt hair." In confusion, Midoriya pointed at himself to confirm if he was talking about him. "You have been muttering this entire time. Stop that. If you can't bother to take this seriously, leave. You are distracting the rest of us," the man with glasses said. Out of embarrassment, Midoriya then closed his mouth and covered it with his hands. Several others in the audience laughed at him too. Alexander couldn't care less, honestly. All right, Present Mike began again. "Examinee number 7111. Thanks for calling for your request," he said, giving the young man a thumbs up. "The 4th villain type is worth 0 points." Present Mike then went on to explain that the 4th type was more of obstacle rather than an enemy that needed to be taken down, which Alexander thought was wired. What's the point if you got no score from defeating it? This whole mock battle sounded more and more like a video game than an entrance exam. After wrapping up the last information, Present Mike was about to finish the orientation. "All right, let's finish up with our school motto. As General Napoleon Bonaparte once said, 'A true hero is one who overcomes life's misfortunes.'" Now that's a tasty sour bite. You ready to go beyond? Let's hear a plus ultra, he yelled, but no one yelled it with him. "Good luck. Hope you practice more than strong books," he then said and left the podium. Later, the group that headed to Battle Center B arrived via bus. Most of the group had gathered near the giant gate that was connected to a massive wall surrounding a reconstruction of a real-life city. Alexander had gotten his sword and had placed on his back. He also hadn't bothered putting on sport clothing since he never had a use for it before. He looked at the big battle center he was about to enter for the exam. This is crazy, he thought. Where does you get all that money from? But it did give an explanation on just why he had gotten a home in an apartment building. It was practically nothing compared to what they had built here. So, it must relatively cheap for them lend a home for him, when they had like 4 or 5 more of these battle centers just like this one. Alexander then looked forward and saw the green-haired boy from before. He looked incredibly nervous from all the shaking. Alexander decided he had nothing better to do, so walked over to nervous boy. Midoriya was trying to calm himself for whatever was about to happen inside. However, it was going poorly. His dream of becoming a hero lay beyond those doors, but if he failed, it would a massive bump on that road. However, his chain of thought was interrupted when he suddenly felt someone touching his shoulder, which also startled him a bit. "Wow, calm down there," a stranger with black hair, crimson red eyes, and gray-red trench coat said. "Didn't mean to scare the living soul out of you," he joked. Midoriya sighed heavily in relief after finding out he was in no danger. "Sorry, just butterflies in stomach is all," he said to the stranger. "I'll say, I saw you vibrating like some of those old mobile phones used to do. I have an idea. How about you actually try breathing deeply instead shaking?" the stranger suggested. Midoriya took his advice and started breathing deep and long. The nervousness in him soon after decreased immensely. Thanks, I needed that. Who are you, by the way? Midoriya asked the stranger. The stranger extended his right hand for a shake. Alexander Kowalczyk, you? Midoriya happily accepted the handshake. Izukumidoriya. The stranger Alexander was then suddenly reminded of something. Wait, hold, aren't you the guy who nearly fell on his face like right outside the back at the UA building? Midoriya started starching the left side of his head out of embarrassment. Oh, you saw that? Yeah, that was me. He admitted. All of this is just so nerve-wracking. Everyone here probably has an amazing quirk, and that gear they had makes them look so much more professional than me. Midoriya referred to everyone in front of the gate. Alexander glanced at the people in front, but wasn't impressed. If you think what they have is cool, then take a look at this. I call it uprising, he said, pulling his sword from his back. Wow, Midoriya audibly gasped. The sword Alexander had looked super cool with the whole fantasy style it had. That looks so cool. Can I touch it? He asked, slightly looking like he was about to drool over it. To which Alexander responded with a simple, no. Then Alexander noticed someone in the group ahead. Hey, isn't that the girl who helped you? Alexander pointed ahead with his sword. Huh? Midoriya sounded and then looked at where Alexander was pointing. True enough, ahead was the brown-haired girl that used her quirk to stop him from falling not so long ago. Hey, you are right. I should probably go thank her, right? I mean, that is what you usually do when someone helps you out, Midoriya said. Alexander chuckled and clapped Midoriya once on the shoulder. You go get her, tiger, Alexander said. However, Midoriya took that sentence the wrong way. What? That's not really what I... Alexander chuckled again. Relax, I know what you mean. Reluctantly, Midoriya started to walk over towards the girl, but he suddenly touched on his shoulder again. It wasn't Alexander because he was right next to him. He looked over his shoulder to only get startled once he saw it was that guy with the glasses from the orientation. He was here too. She looks like she's trying to focus on the trails ahead. He turned his gaze on Midoriya and asked with serious look. What are you going to do? Distract her and ruin her chances to succeed? He accused. What? No, of course not, Midoriya started, but Alexander cut in with a very relaxed attitude. Calm down their spectacles. He was going to thank the girl for helping him earlier. There is nothing wrong with that, is there? Alexander said. The man with glasses, still very serious, then told Alexander and Midoriya, we are here to join one of the top schools in the country. We can't afford to be relaxed. The man with glasses countered. Just like he showed at the orientation, the man with glasses was uptight. Alexander then said, look, either you pass or you don't. So, chill out, would you? Even if the tone Alexander used was calm and cool, the young man with glasses immediately countered with a new unexpected statement. Oh, now I see. You both plan to undermine the rest of us, he accused them both. Both Midoriya and Alexander raised an eyebrow. I am sorry, what? Alexander asked, confused to the heck he was talking about. Both of you plan to sabotage the exam so you can get in. By disrupting our concentration before start would put a damper on our chances, and the two of you would gain a mile lead, the young man said, but it didn't make any logical sense to either Alexander or Midoriya. I am sorry, but the insane asylum is nowhere around here. You might want to check in at the police station so they can show you the way. Alexander half-mocked the man for accusing them. It was then Midoriya slowly tried to sneak away from the two arguing. He didn't plan on causing a scene. However, Alexander noticed Midoriya was sneaking off and quickly grabbed the neck collar of his tracksuit. Oh no, you don't. You are part of this discussion, Alexander said. Midoriya didn't want to be there, but he felt helpless as Alexander's gripe was too strong for him. But in the meantime, he also overheard others from their group was chatting about them just a little further ahead. Hey, over there. That the guy who almost bit it out front earlier? He practically wet himself in the lecture hall. And that guy with a sword is helping him. What is that for? Trying to look like a badass. Those two are just a bunch of losers, but less rivals to worry about, I guess. After overhearing everyone's thoughts about Alexander and himself, Midoriya was a little down. Unwilling he had let Alexander get taunted at for helping him. Alexander, on the other hand, heard also what people from the group was saying, but couldn't care less for what a bunch of randoms thought. He simply stood still, hearing the young man with the glasses rant as he stood with a bored and annoyed expression. But just then, from on top the wall, the hero present, Mike, shouted to the examinees. "Right, let's start." Everyone stopped what they were doing and turned their gaze upwards. "Get moving. There are no countdowns in real battles. Run, run, run. You are wasting airtime here," he shouted to the examinees. Midoriya then looked around him and noticed that everyone had already started moving into the battle center. "Ah, I am getting left behind. Hey, wait up, save some villains for me," he shouted. Alexander, who was running just a little ahead from, turned his head over his shoulder. "Good luck, Midoriya. Break a leg." "Not literally," he shouted to the green-haired boy. "Thanks, Alexander." "You too," Midoriya yelled back. Alexander then left Midoriya by running into an alleyway. Alexander thought that since most examinees would attack the enemies at the gate first, he would have to run further in before attacking to best possible number of enemies to destroy. Alexander sped up his speed and started sprinting through the fake city. Eventually, he came to a big open area, where he waited for about half a minute until robotic enemies came around the corner and started attacking him. "Great, everything is in place. This is where the fun begins." He smiled and pulled his sword, uprising from his back. A few minutes later, inside dark room somewhere in the vicinity of UA, the teacher sat facing tons of monitors overlooking all battle centers. From what they had seen so far, there were many promising students this year. However, there was one that stood out from all the others. The transfer student from Russia, Alexander Kowalczyk. The monitor watching him displayed the young man slicing, punching, kicking, and dodging with a level of skill rarely seen by examinees. My. I don't think I have ever seen fighting like this in the battle centers before. I agree. I believe he make an excellent addition to UA. Suo, what do we have on him? Let me check. One moment, HM. Well, this wired. What? What is it? Remember that student that was recommended to us, but his grades seem a bit low. That's him? Really? Are you sure? It says right here. Name, Alexander Kowalczyk. Age 16, born in a town on the verge of the Siberian wilderness. Moscow downtown school graduate. What does it say about his family? Apparently Mr. Kowalczyk lost his parents at the age of 8. Sad to hear, truly. What's he is Quirk? I am imaging and augmentation type. Well, you're right. It's been named MSTR Rogue. Allows him to do hat he is currently doing on screen. Well, he definitely got the whole puckish rogue look down, and very stylish. How many points is he on now? Pretty incredible for a non-U. A member, 95 points and climbing. 95? Yes. Well, I believe we have seen enough from young Mr. Kowalczyk. Let's move on. After several long minutes of fighting through rows of enemies, Alexander had a good look at the carnage he had created. Destroyed robots lay scattered across the big open area. Alexander smirked and placed his sword on his back. Perhaps it was a good idea to go back and find the other examinees. Just then, the few other examinees came around the corner. Their mouths dropped to the floor once they saw the robotic graveyard Alexander had made. Unbelievable. That sword guy did all of this. I thought he was a worthless nobody. Yeah, me too. Their conversation was cut short when Alexander suddenly jumped and landed right in front of them. The three examinees stepped aside when Alexander was but to walk down the alley they stood in. Alexander smiled and said to the three, "I give you a cookie if you beat that." He then laughed and continued walking. The three examinees were left completely shocked as Alexander disappeared into the city. Less than a minute later, Alexander had come to where the majority of the candidates were still taking on some villain robots. And at the same moment Midoriya also arrived. "Oi, Midoriya, how many have you gotten?" Alexander asked. "Alexander, what are you doing here? Why aren't you running like everyone else?" Midoriya asked frantically. "Me? Oh, you don't need to worry about me. I have already gotten around 4 or 5 dozen or maybe more," Alexander assured as casually as possibly. "Fu? 4 or 5 dozen?" Midoriya gasped. Meanwhile, back at the dark room with the teachers. Clearly, the examines have no idea how many villains there are or their location. They have limited time, must cover a vast area and hunt down every last target. Or what's left form what that Kawoksik boy did. Nevertheless, some are using information gathering, while others rely on speed to pull ahead. Of course, remaining calm under pressure can be a huge advantage. As pure power and combat ability. The most successful students use a combination of all these tactics. They are the ones who rank up the highest scores. There are indeed quite many promising candidates this year. Well, there is plenty of time before it's over. Then someone in the room pressed a big red button. Outside in the battle centers, it suddenly started shaking in the fake cities. It made all the applicants stop their destruction of villainous dummy robots. Smoke gathered from the middle and spread throughout the city. The ground rumbled more as if something was on the move. And soon it came into view. It was a gargantuan robot that stuck its head over most of the buildings. It was the Type 4 villain that they were all warned not to fight. Isn't this a little extreme? Midoriya thought, shaking fear and shock. The giant robot punched the street below, sending out a shockwave of wind, smoke and dust towards the examinees standing. Everyone held up their arms to block from dust. Except for Alexander, he was gazing right the Type 4 without feeling the need to block for the winds and dust. He was like an unmoving rock in the storm. Midoriya had fallen backwards onto ground in gust and seas of the robot. The dust clouds settled a bit, and at that point applicants started running in panic to get away from the big robot. Even that young man with the glasses, who briefly saw Alexander and Midoriya as he ran past them. Alexander not showing any sign of fear. The only two people who weren't moving were Midoriya and Alexander. Alexander whistled. "DMN, that's big," sounding not concerned. Midoriya, however, "This is a disaster. I gotta run and find some smaller villains," he screamed in terror and started to slowly crawl away. Less than 2 minutes remaining, it suddenly came in from the many speakers that dotted around the battle center. "What? 2 minutes?" Midoriya panicked. Everything that he trained with all might was about to go up in smoke. But just then Alexander saw something through the smoke. He then crouched down and grabbed on to one of Midoriya's legs. "Ah, Alexander, what are you doing?" Midoriya screamed. "Take a look down there," Alexander calmly, but loudly answered. Midoriya didn't know what the world he was thinking, but he looked anyway, and he was horrified again. Not long away from the robot lay the girl that helped him earlier again, but she was trapped underneath some debris, and that robot was getting closer and could accidentally crush her with its weight. While Midoriya was staring in horror, Alexander stood up again. For a brief moment he stood still. Then a smirk formed on his face and turned his head down to Midoriya. "Hey Midoriya," he shouted to get his attention, and it worked. Midoriya snapped out of his fear and looked up at Alexander from the ground. Alexander then said to Midoriya, "What do say to we take that thing down and save the girl?" "Wha what?" Midoriya said stammered. "Yeah, this thing is supposed to be stronger than the others, right? Even though we don't get any points for taking it down, I am still getting excited. You can come if you want to, but that thing is going to get destroyed before the timer reaches 0. Alexander said and started walking towards it with great confidence in his eyes. Midoriya was stunned to see the resolve that Alexander displayed. He wasn't scared of the robot's size or appearance. To see a person walk so calmly and confident, it was so, he couldn't really put into words, uplifting. Whatever it was, it sparked something within him. So much so that when he looked at the trapped girl again, he knew he had to do something to save her. Just then his body started reacting on its own. Alexander redrew his sword again. This was going to fun. The first he would wah. Just then a wind blasted past Alexander. He quickly looked over his shoulder to what was going on. When he turned, he saw that Midoriya was nowhere to seen on ground, but at the same time he suddenly sensed something was above him. He looked up, and to his surprise, it was Midoriya. He jumped all the way up there. Midoriya channeled the power of his new quirk, One for All. The power surged through his body and Midoriya unleashed a massive punch right into the head, the metallic monstrosity. The punch was so powerful that it created a huge dent in what was its face, and then it slowly fell to the ground. Those looking, they all stood in awe at the amazing show of strength. Even Alexander had his mouth opened wide. But a moment after the expression turned into a big childish smile as he began laughing. "Ha ha, DMN Midoriya, "You are not bad at all," he shouted in excitement. Midoriya had done it. He had taken care of the big enemy type and saved the girl. But there was still no time to waste. He would have to move as fast as he could if he wanted to get some points in before the timer stopped. But he then came to the realization that his right arm and both legs broken because his body was used to the amount of power that One for All gave. Only one arm worked. The rest was broken. And he was falling. Falling fast. "Ah!" Midoriya screamed at the top of his lungs. Meanwhile, on the ground, Alexander saw that Midoriya looked like he was in trouble. "Uo, he is going to be dead meat if I don't anything, better save him," Alexander muttered to himself. Alexander got ready to jump to catch Midoriya in midair. But before he could, Midoriya was suddenly slapped right in the face, much to Alexander's confusion. It was the girl from before. She was floating in the air on a metal part of a robot enemy. Was that her quirk, to make things float? The slap the girl hit on Midoriya made him float just like the robot part she was on, and they both slowly descended. Alexander saw what she was doing and ran right underneath the floating Midoriya. Alexander looked at the girl and yelled to her, "All right, you can let go now, I got him." The girl noticed him and then put her hands together. "Release," she said, and her and Midoriya fell down. Alexander caught Midoriya as his gravity returned to normal. "Midoriya? Hello? You are not dead, are you?" Alexander asked as he placed Midoriya on the ground carefully. Midoriya opened his eyes slowly. He looked at Alexander, who was crouching on one knee next to him. "Alexander, is that girl all right?" he asked, sounding completely beat. Alexander looked over to the girl on the robot part. "She was vomiting quite a lot. She is. If I have to take an educated guess, I would have to say she is fine," he told Midoriya. Midoriya was glad, but he suddenly remembered that he still had no points. Midoriya started crawling away fast since most of his body was now out of commission. "I still have a point to at least get 1 point in." Alexander was about to say something but was interrupted when Present Mike screamed over the speakers, "Time's up." The countdown had reached 0. Midoriya hadn't scored a signal point. It was over. All he trained for went out in smoke. And soon after he went unconscious from being so exhausted and shocked. Alexander crossed his arms and stared at the green-haired unconscious boy. Didn't seem fair to him that Midoriya took out the biggest target around and wouldn't get any points from it. Guess it didn't matter now. Those were the rules and there was nothing he could do for him. Shame, that kid had some crazy power. Alexander got to his feet and started walking away. While Alexander was walking to the exit, he started heard what the others were saying about the green-haired boy. "Did you see that dude's attack? I didn't think he had that kind of strength." "Me either. Looked like some type of reinforcement quirk, but there is something else. If such an amazing quirk, how come he didn't score any points all day? Maybe he was training to trick all of us. Joke's on him. There is no way he is passing with a score like that." "Sure, but you got to admit that was an amazing move." By the sound of it, all the other examins around were also very impressed, but still considered the kid a failure. In Alexander's mind, they probably would not last that long in a real fight against a demon. Even though Midoriya got wrecked by his own quirk, he might just be able to knock out a large demon with a punch like that. Then again, if his quirk did again mess up his body, other demons might be nearby to finish him off once they saw he was completely defenseless. Besides Alexander, there was another in the small crowd near the unconscious Midoriya. It was the black-haired young man with the glasses. In his eyes, the green-haired boy just sacrificed everything in order to save the young girl who was trapped under rubble. Instead gathering points, he selflessness jumped in the fray to help her. The man looked over to see the Alexander walking away from everyone, eyes focused and not looking at anyone. A complete opposite to whom he talked to before the exam started. If he remembered correctly, that guy didn't show a hint of fear as the Type 4 robot was making its way down the street while everyone else ran away in fear. Of course, he would have done similar things like that too. Then suddenly he thought of something. Could it be that the teachers saw it too? Maybe the green-haired boy had a chance. Just then, walking through the battle center, an old lady was making her way through the examinees. She passed Alexander, who curiously started watching what she was doing in the battle center. "Very nice, good work all round." You are heroes in my eyes, every one of you." She then reached into her pockets and pulled out small bits of candy. "Here, have some gummies." She went around and started giving candy to all the examines. She then came to Midoriya, who was still out cold. He got hurt this bad by his own quirk. It is as if his body could handle his power at all. To Alexander and every other examinee's surprise, they then saw the old reach down and embrace Midoriya. At first Alexander was completely flabbergasted, but then he started to snicker at the sight. Others around wondered just what the heck was she just doing. One of the examinees, a guy, looked very sophisticated. "That lady is the reason you can hold these reckless exams." A green light enveloped Midoriya and his wounds began to heal. The youthful heroine recovery girl. Alexander then formed a smile on his face and he turned around to walk out of the place. When he got to the entrance again, he quickly saw that the one called Hero present Mike stood waiting. "So, potential student, what do you think of the exam? Was it strong? Was it easy? Please do tell," he asked with much eagerness in his tone. "I think the school did a poor job in point management. If that big one had any points in it, that guy in there would have wiped the competition," Alexander casually said and continued on walking. "Thank you for your input. We hope to see you again in the near future," Present Mike said to him before he left. 1 week later. Alexander was at his home sitting his couch. Opposite of him was the TV turned on showing the board of Darta again, and next to the TV stood Miss Calhoun waiting patiently. "So, we trust you got in?" the board director asked. Alexander lifted a small disc to show the board. "Earlier he had gotten a letter from you, and inside of it was this small disc." The disc had projected a hologram of All Might of all people giving him his entrance exam results. Apparently, they were absolutely impressed with his combat score, 131 points, but nonetheless, he was in. "Was there any doubt, boss?" he said sarcastically as he waved the disc back and forth a bit. "Excellent. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem like there is any supernatural activities in your area at the moment. So, we suggest that you take time to relax before starting in school. That is all, agents. Board out," the director said, and connection to the TV was cut. Miss Calhoun walked over to young hybrid. "So, this will be your first time going to a school, isn't it?" Sounding a little skeptical there, Miss Calhoun? "Don't worry, this will be a piece of cake," Alexander overconfidently said. "Haha. Yes, we'll see if you still have that same attitude once you start," she jokingly said, though she was still serious. "Enjoy yourself, Alex. I will contact you as soon as a job is ready." "Sounds good. Later, Miss Calhoun," Alexander said and leaned backwards in the couch. Miss Calhoun then left, leaving the young half-demon alone again in his apartment. Since he had just passed an exam for the first time in his life, perhaps he should go and get a burger. "This is atrocious," Alexander thought when he stood in front of his mirror in the bathroom. He was wearing the uniform he was given by Yua. The school uniform was light gray with blue jeans, and Alexander, who was so used to wear his own stylish trench coat. Though he always looked confident, his eyes were twitching angrily. He had to wear this. For years? Unfortunately, that was law in the country, so he had no choice but wear it. But it still looked ugly to no end. Alexander reluctantly swung his new school bag over his shoulder. His sword was not with him at the moment. Nevertheless, he then went out the door and locked it. Out on the small walkway with door leading into the apartments in the building, Alexander walked over to the staircase leading down from the floor he lived on. Just then one of the doors on the top floor opened. Alexander could hear some talk. "I see you soon." The door then fully opened to then reveal that it was, to Alexander's surprise, that green-haired boy from the entrance exam. Midoriya closed the door to his home and turned surprisingly see Alexander. Midoriya threw his hands around in a panic like he had done several times at the entrance exam. "Woo, Alexander, what are you doing here?" Midoriya nervously and loudly asked. "What the? Midoriya, right? You live in this apartment building too?" Alexander asked curiously. "Wait, you also live here? Since when?" Midoriya asked. "Since a week before the UA entrance exam," Alexander explained. Alexander then noticed that Midoriya was wearing the same uniform that he was. Is that a UA uniform? You got accepted?" Midoriya regained his composure. "Why, yes, I passed too. The judges had given me points for recuse point for helping that girl from being crushed by the Type 4 villain. Alexander didn't expect that at all. Well, I be a Dullahan's uncle. Didn't think they'll let you pass. Nice going, he said and gave him a thumbs up. A smile formed on Midoriya's face. Thanks, Alexander. So, you made it in too. So, what class did you get into? He then asked. Class 1A, Alexander replied. No wait, are you for real? I am also going to be in 1A, Midoriya said. Wow, all of this seems super convenient, don't you think? And the day just started too, Alexander said. It was pretty odd they had not noticed the lived in the same building for most have been 1 or 2 months now. Yeah, I mean chances were already pretty slim for us both to have conversation at the exam. And after we both met up at the robot and the girl both with enough points to pass, we never met the entire time since you came here. Both of us are going to be in the same class. I mean the odds are blah, 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 blah. Midoriya started talking non-stop just out of the blue. Alexander stood dumbfounded looking at the green-haired boy, suddenly started talking endlessly out into infinity. Slowly, Alexander raised his hands before then quickly slapping them together to make a loud clap, which brought Midoriya out of his own talking trance as he was startled by the loud noise. What was that? He asked the green-haired boy. Oh sorry sometimes I just get these episodes where I mutter to myself out loud and I just can't seem to stop. Midoriya explained. It was a habit that he had been doing for years at this point. Oh, okay then, Alexander said and turned around. I guess we better get to school. Midoriya happily agreed. Right, we cannot be late on first day. Both of them then began moving. Alexander looked to Midoriya and said, I am still pretty new around town. You know the fastest way to UA? Yeah, I know a route. Midoriya nodded. After some time Midoriya and Alexander arrived at the school. After they entered school ground, they jogged up a couple of stairs to look for their classroom. Here it is, Alexander said as Midoriya came over. What the? This thing is huge. Are there giants here? Midoriya loudly remarked when saw there was at least twice the size of a normal person. Giants? Man, that would be funny. Can you imagine if this door was regular sized and a giant had to crawl to get in? Alexander joked while rubbing his chin. Midoriya readied himself. The most promising students in the country are behind this door, he said, and he immediately thought of Bakugou and that other guy with the glasses, which in turn made him very nervous. Alexander shrugged and reached for the door handle, but then someone yelled from the edge of the hallway, Hey, wait up. Midoriya and Alexander turned their heads to see a girl running towards them. The girl had long snow-white hair that went all the way down her back. Her eyes were purple, and she wore a similar uniform to what Alexander and Midoriya were wearing, except it had a blue skirt and leggings instead of jeans. Her height looked to be just about the same as Alexander. The girl stopped in front of them and tried to catch her breath before speaking. This is Class 1A, right? She asked, sounding somewhat nervous. Yeah, this is Class 1A, Alexander said and pointed up on a little sign next to the door. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, she said. I thought I was going to be super late looking for the room. Downtown was so crowded this morning. She then extended her hand out to Midoriya. The name is Riina Kikuchi. What is yours? She asked with a glad expression. Nervously, Midoriya extended his hand to shake hers. Oh, my name is Izukumidoriya. The girl Riina then reached her hand out for Alexander to shake. And you are? Alexander accepted the handshake. Alexander. Midoriya and Alexander, huh? Nice to meet you both. Wow, can you guys believe we are going to UA? I mean, the reason I got accepted in was because that this year they had so many applicants trying to get in that they had to accept more than last year, she said to the two. I heard about that. Midoriya said, usually there are around 20 students in each class, but this year 22 students. It's crazy to think so many passed the requirements, Midoriya stated. Alexander then put his hand back on the door handle. Well, let's go meet our classmates then. Right. Hopefully the people here are nice, Midoriya said as Alexander opened the door. And when the door opened, that hope died quickly. Take your feet off that desk now. Huh. It was exactly the two people who Midoriya feared it was. Bakugou and the guy with the glasses he met at the entrance exam. It's the first day, and you are already disrespecting this academy by scuffing school property, you critter. The guy with the glasses told the blonde-haired Bakugou. You're kidding me, right? Your old school put a stick up your ass, or are you born with it? Bakugou taunted the guy. Just my luck, Midoriya woefully thought. The guy glasses tried to reconcile with the unpleasant blonde boy. Let's start over. I am Tenya Ida from the Salme Private Academy. But the explosive boy continued taunting. Salme, huh? So, you must think you are better than me. I am gonna have fun tearing you a new one. Guy with glasses was startled by Bakugou's violent, intimidating behavior. You would threaten me? Your own classmate? Are you sure you are in the right place? Suddenly, the two noticed that Alexander and Midoriya had opened the door into the classroom. It's them. The entire class turned to see the newcomers, making the green messy-haired boy ever more nervous. Hi, Midoriya weirdly blurted out. The guy with glasses walked towards the two, introducing himself in the process. I am Tenya Ida of the... But Midoriya threw up his hands in a defensive manner. Yeah, I know, huh? After the guy with glasses stopped up, Midoriya introduced himself. I am Izukumidoriya. It's super nice to meet you. Alexander introduced himself more confident than Midoriya. The guy with glasses tried saying their names to get a feel for it. Midoriya, Alexander, you two realized there was something more to the practical exam, didn't you? Midoriya and Alexander were a little confused over the guy now known as Tenya Ida's sudden friendliness. You two must be very perceptive. I completely misjudged you both. I admit as students you are both superior to me. He turned to Alexander. Especially you, good sir. You acted with a totally calm attitude throughout the exam, staying focused on the goal the whole time, even when we others started panicking after the big villain robot made it onto the scene. You stood your ground like a pro. He did a quick bow. Please forgive me for making such a needless argument with you before we began. Yeah, honestly, I have mostly forgotten what we were arguing about anyway. Since we are going to be classmates, let's just ignore that whole thing, okay? Alexander suggested, not too interested starting up a useless argument again. Ida happily accepted and buried the hatchet. Yes, let's start over. Rihanna then moved past both Midoriya and Alexander. Hello, my name Rihanna Kikuchi. I am going to go in this class as well. Oh yes, forgive my manners. Nice to meet you, Tenya Ida. I'll look forward to working with you as well, Kikuchi. Ida and Rihanna then shook hands. Suddenly, a voice came from behind them. Hey, I recognize that messed up hair, falling boy. Everyone then turned around to see the girl from the exam, who nearly got crushed by the Type 4 villain robot, in a similar-looking school uniform to theirs. Midoriya was stunned to see her. Oh, it's you again, Alexander said. Oh my gosh, it that nice girl who talked to me, Midoriya thought. She looks good in that uniform. The girl named Yurikaka quickly recapped the events of the practical exam with punches and a cheerful expression. Kikuchi had no idea what the girl was taking about, so she turned Ida and Alexander. Do you have any idea what she is talking about? She asked curiously. Yeah, you see Leaf Hair here took out a Type 4 villain in the entrance exam. I was going to attack it, but he beat me to it, Alexander told her. Ida continued for him. The girl here was about to be crushed under its treads when Midoriya valiantly jumped upwards and knocked out the colossal in one forceful blow. Ida said. Kikuchi's expression turned into one of awe. What? Wow. This little guy took down one of those big ones? Ida and Alexander nodded. That's awesome, she said. Oh, hey, hi, Midoriya nervously stammered to the girl. I should probably thank you for going in and talking to the teachers. Huh? How do you know about that? The girl Uraraka asked. Meanwhile, in the room was Bakugou quietly sitting at his desk, thinking on how that pathetic Deku, Izukumidoriya, made it in. When he heard, he confronted Midoriya outside their old school, and he threatened him to drop out. However, Bakugou was stunned by the helpless Midoriya, who told him that he was not going to drop out, and he could do nothing to stop him. Now he wanted Midoriya crushed more than ever. He just had to find out how he got into UA. Back with the five in the doorway. What do you think we are going to do today besides orientation? I wonder what teachers are like. Oh man, I can't wait to meet everyone. Suddenly Uraraka's talk was interrupted when a new voice spoke. If you are just here to make friends, then you can pack up your stuff and leave now. Midoriya then looked down to only get startled when he saw a man lay in a yellow sleeping bag. Ida, Alexander and Kikuchi then also tranced their heads downwards to where he was looking. Uraraka then also slowly turned around see. After a brief moment of processing, they saw it was a man curled up in a yellow sleeping bag. The man in the sleeping had tired eyes. 4 out of the students excluding Alexander gazed at the man with horrified faces. Who the heck was this weirdo and why was he in a sleeping bag? Welcome to you, A's hero course. The man in the sleeping bag then pulled out a little juice bag and began drinking it. What is that? Kikuchi nearly screamed. It's a man? But why is he on the floor of all places? Ida then followed with. Alexander had seen weirder so, not that big of a deal. In fact, it was kind of funny to him. The man in the sleeping bag rose to his feet and zipped down and got out of said sleeping bag. It took 20 seconds before you all shut up. That not gonna work. Time is precious and rational students would understand that. The man said. He had long black hair and wore black clothing with a scarf. All wonder who the hell this was. If he was from you, he must be some kind of pro hero. But he looked so worn out. Hello, I am Shoto Aizawa, your teacher. The man named Aizawa said, shocking the class. Their teacher? Right, let's get to it. Put these on and head outside, he said, holding up an outdoor training suit. This caused few to raise an eyebrow. A few moments later outside, the class 1 students had changed into the training suits they were given by their apparent new teacher, Mr. Aizawa. What, a quirk assessment test? Most of the class yelled when they heard it. On an unrelated note, Alexander also very much disliked this outfit he was given. But he simply didn't have any reason other than personal preference, so he would have to suffer for now in this school outdoor suit. But the orientation, we are gonna miss it, Uraraka said. Don't we have like protocols to follow in this school or something? Kikuchi nervously asked. Their new teacher Aizawa countered. If you really wanted to make it to the big leagues, you can't waste time on pointless ceremonies. The students were slightly taken back by Aizawa's statement. Here at UA we are not tethered to traditions, and protocol is flexible. That means I get to run my class however I see fit. You have taken standardized tests most of your lives. Mr. Aizawa pulled up his phone, but you never got used quirks in physical exams before. The country is still trying to pretend we are all created equal by not letting those with the most power excel, and it's not rational. Oh, none of them had any real idea. If they only knew what kind freakish hellspawn really existed in the shadows. None of them would handle some of the stuff I have killed, Alexander thought amusingly to himself. One day the Ministry of Education will learn. Aizawa continued and then turned to Bakugou. Bakugou, you managed to score a lot of points in the entrance exam. 77 points. A very impressive number by all standards. Bakugou relished in the praise. Ha, it's natural that I was the best. He grinned. However, your total score pales in comparison to what our international transfer student Kawakik over here managed to score, Aizawa said, which caused Bakugou and the others in the class raised an eyebrow as Aizawa turned to the young Kawakik. Alexander Kawakik, you managed to score one of the highest amount points the school has ever seen. An exceptional score of 131 villain points, well done. With time to spare afterwards even. This shocked the other students. 131 points, Uraraka thought. How in the world did he get that many? Midoriya thought. He had time for that? Kikuchi thought. I heard that a candidate managed to achieve an impressive score, but I never imagined it was Alexander who did it, Ida thought, amazed by Alexander's prowess like the rest. However, none was more surprised than Bakugou, who was recovering from said news. Someone managed to surpass him. That was also some very impressive swordplay. Most these days show to have a good grasp on melee weapons, but you showed to have more than that. At least an expect level efficiency. I take it you have been training a lot? Aizawa asked with the same unemotional tone, to which Alexander just nodded to confirm. The other students were now even more stunned. A sword? Thought those who were at other specific battle centers. Bakugou could not believe what he was hearing. This guy managed to him with a damn metal stick. He gritted his teeth. What can I say? I aim to please, Alexander said. Aizawa then said, now then we should move on to the tests. Meanwhile, Bakugou was fuming with rage. He was supposed to be the greatest out of everyone. First Deku, now this sword-wielding nobody. He had to show him who boss around here. I only have one question. Aizawa then pulled up a small baseball. I don't know what they teach as sports where you are from, so have you ever played softball, Mr. Kawaksik? I am afraid not, Alexander replied. Well then I keep it simple. Aizawa then tossed the ball to Alexander. Throw the ball as hard as you can down the field. Use whatever means you want, and try to combine the power of your quirk into your throw. Alexander walked up to the baseball pad that was in front of Mr. Aizawa. After cracking his neck 2 times, he looked down the empty dirt field. Okay, how should I do this? He thought as Mr. Aizawa and the other student waited patiently for the red-eyed young man to throw the ball. As Alexander stood at the baseball pad, an idea suddenly popped into his head. Alexander turned around and then asked Mr. Aizawa, Yo teach, do I necessarily have to throw the ball? I said to use whatever means, so you have my go as long as it goes down the field. Mr. Aizawa told him. Good enough for me, Alexander said. Alexander then tossed the ball way high up into the air. The teacher and the students wondered what he was going to do, followed the ball with their eyes. Meanwhile, Alexander waited for gravity to take hold of the ball so it could come down again. When it did so, Alexander got ready for when the ball was getting to the point he wanted. When it did, Alexander jumped half a meter up into the air and then proceeded to kick the ball in a circular arch, so it would fly down the field. When his kick connected, there was a loud audible asterisk thwap asterisk. The next moment the ball flew down the field at a terrifying speed. The ball was kicked so far that the students had trouble seeing it, and eventually they unable to. It finally landed and Mr. Aizawa checked his phone for the result. Very good Kawaksik, just like in the exam. He then turned around to the others to reveal the travel distance for the ball. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities. This is the most rational way of figuring out your potential as a pro hero. 1.101 8M. All the other students were speechless. Holy crap, 1.101 8 meters? That's over a kilometer. A young man with orange blonde hair said, who was standing next to a woman with a black ponytail. My, he sure is powerful, isn't he? A pink girl said. She had horns and the white in her eyes were black. Wonder what I would get. Bakugou could not help but be awestruck as well, but he also raged at the same time of easy this guy made it look. He didn't like it at all. One of the students that were a more enthusiastic cheered in the group. This what I am talking about. Using our quirks as much as we want. However, Mr. Aizawa was thinking differently. So this looks fun, huh? The students again raised an eyebrow at Aizawa's comment. You have 3 years to become a hero. You think it's all going to be fun and games and playtime? He snapped at them. He suddenly gained a sinister grin. Idiots. Today you'll compete in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last has none and will be expelled immediately. Aizawa said, frightening all the students. Immediate expulsion? 8 tests? Oh crap, not good, Midoriya thought. After all, he could only use one for all at either 0 or 100% with no control. Like I said, I get to decide how this class is runs. Aizawa looked at them again, but he pulled up his hair to further scare the students. Understand? He said with a sinister smile. If that's a problem, then you can head home right now. A huge test on the first day of school. What was Midoriya gonna do? You can't send one of us home. I mean, we just got here, Uraraka protested. Even if it wasn't the first day, that isn't fair. Oh, you think natural disasters are? Aizawa countered. Or power-hungry villains? A catastrophic accident that wipe out whole cities. But this is a school, not a natural disaster. Kikuchi said, trying to support Uraraka's protest. Mr. Aizawa sighed as Alexander walked back to the other students. You are missing the point, Miss Kikuchi. Let me rephrase. The world is full of unfairness. It's a hero's job to try to combat that unfairness. If you want to be a pro, you're going to have to push yourself to the brink. For the next 3 years A will throw one terrible hardship after another. So, go beyond plus ultra style. Aizawa sang the school motto, "Show me it's no mistake that you are here." Not everyone approved of the teacher's choice of running the class, however this was the top hero school around. They had no choice. Bakugou angrily stretched his arms and legs. He was going to show all these nerds who was going to be the next top world hero. By force if he had to. Now then, we are just wasting time by talking. Let the games begin. Aizawa said. Test 1. 50-meter dash. As the names suggest on all these tests, they were all very self-explanatory. First, they had to run 50 meters while Aizawa took the time with talking device at the end of the run. Ready, go, it said to the first two contestants who were Ida and a frog girl of all things. Ada managed to get 3.04 seconds, while the frog girl, known as Isayu Asui, got 5.58 seconds. Aizawa even commented to Ida's speed Quirk. Well, he is diffidently in his element, but speed won't help in every test. Next was Uraraka, who used her quirk to nullify the gravity of her clothes, making her lighter than before. She was up against a guy with a big tail for a quirk named Ojiro. She didn't manage to win, but at least it was faster than her middle school record, scoring 7.15 seconds, while Ojiro scored 5.49 seconds. Then it was the guy with the laser navel, called Aoyama, versus the pink girl called Ishido. Aoyama tried to use his laser navel to finish the dash, but was burned out halfway through, to then have Ishido come in and take the win. Aoyama acted very smug, and everyone thought he was just a tool when it came to his personality. Then it was Bakugou and Midoriya. Bakugou finished the dash faster than Midoriya by using his explosive hands as a booster and scored 4.13 seconds, while Midoriya scored 7.02 seconds. In his arrogance, Bakugou gloated about his powers. "My power has more uses than anyone else in this school," he proclaimed. However, he soon ate those words when he heard the robot say, 3.58 seconds. Stunned, he turned around to see that sword guy Kawaksik standing at the end of the finishing line, smirking like it was no big deal. "Nice going," Uraraka said. "Yeah, that was pretty fast," Midoriya also cheered. "Thanks." Alexander gave them the thumbs up as then crossed his arms afterwards, playing it cool. Bakugou stood once again with anger towards that foreign guy. Midoriya, after cheering on Alexander, soon began to think about how he was going to pass. He needed control first one of all, but he had only a slight idea on how he should do it. He remembered back to him and All Might talking on the beach at some point. It was about 3 weeks before starting at UA. You can harness one for all. It's simple, he said as he remembered the two were standing at the beach late evening so much so that the stars were out. "You have to feel it," All Might shouted. Midoriya panicked when he said, not knowing how he could, "Can you be a little more specific?" "You already know how to fire with all cylinders," All Might stated back then. "Yeah, but with a lot of broken bones," Midoriya countered. "No, I am talking about the rush inside," All Might said. "You must have felt it coursing through you. What was it like?" Midoriya proceeded to do random noises to explain, but he eventually came up with the perfect metaphor for it. He explained it as an egg in microwave. All Might, though it was a bit too boring, but they went with it. "Keep focusing on that image, and keep the egg from exploding, alright? The more you concentrate, the faster you learn. Control over one for all isn't going to happen overnight, but you'll nail it one day. You just gotta keep trying." Those were the words that Midoriya remembered once he returned from his flashback. Test 2 was grip strength. Not much to say other than Midoriya scored 56.0 kilograms. But the likes of Shoji, a guy who could manipulate his arms and could form them into other things, got 540.0 kilograms. Alexander settled for 320 kilograms. Standing out all the time would be of Hazel. Test 3 was long jumping. Bakugou, Aoyama, and Alexander cleared the sandbox, while Midoriya landed within it. The next what was Aizawa had Alexander do in the beginning, by throwing a ball with quicks. Bakugou managed a distance of 705.2 meters, almost raging over not being able to win against Alexander. It was Uraraka's turn. She nullified the gravity on the ball, so it started flying upwards until it was no longer visible. Aizawa gave her the exaggerated score of infinity, which stunned the students. One came up behind Alexander and gave him a friendly clap in the shoulder. He had spiky red hair. "Sorry, man. Looks like you were beat," he said with a friendly tone. "Nah, it's all right. I can hardly say our teacher is wrong when he makes the rules," Alexander said, not feeling bad he got beat at all. After all, throwing a ball was nothing compared fighting unholy creatures, which he really felt like doing now. Aizawa called up the next person. "All right, Miss Kikuchi, it's your turn now." Riina Kikuchi stepped up to the baseball like all the other students had and readied herself. "Come on, you can do this," she thought to herself. She then threw the ball upwards like Alexander had done. However, she was going to do it a little differently. She then held out her right forearm and suddenly it started to glitter as small purple crystals that then became larger and began forming what looked like a big club attached to her arm. Many of the other students watched excitingly. The Ben came down and Kikuchi then swung her crystal club arm like a bat. She hit the ball and it flew fast down the field until it eventually landed. Mr. Aizawa waited of a sec get the distance on his phone before showing it to Kikuchi. He sounded and showed her the result. 219-1. Kikuchi cheered with a big woohoo and punched upwards at the same time. "Wow, nice," Uraraka applauded along with Ida. "She seems to be able to create crystallized structures on her skin. She can then turn the crystals into whatever she decides. I wonder how detailed she can be," Ida analyzed. Alexander had to admit that was a pretty cool quirk too. Kikuchi then came over and her and Uraraka high-fived each other. Now it was Midoriya's turn. He was going to have to use one for all if he wanted to succeed, even if it did wreck his body. But it was the only way if he wanted to not get expelled. He got into position and was ready to throw. Alexander was standing on the sidelines, stood and watched with some intrigue. Midoriya was going to use that power again. Ever since the exam, Alexander had been a little curious over just what was type of quirk he was using since it had completely burned up Midoriya's own body before. Ida, who's standing next to Alexander on his left and Bakugou on his right. If Midoriya doesn't shape up soon, he's going to get kicked home. Bakugou jumped in. "Huh? Of course he is. He is a quirkless loser," Bakugou proclaimed, much to Alexander and Ida's confusion. "Wait, what?" Alexander thought. "He has a quirk. Did you not hear how he did in the entrance exam?" Ida said. Bakugou waved him off. Midoriya was ready to throw and was about to toss the ball as hard as he could. Alexander stood and watched carefully for Midoriya's quirk to active. But then the unexpected happened right as the ball was about to fly out of Midoriya's hand. The ball only landed some meters away. The robot from the dash test could be heard shouting 46 meters as the ball landed. Midoriya's face paled when tried to figure out what the heck just happened. Same as some of the onlookers who had seen him in action. That included Ida, Alexander and Uraraka were baffled over what happened, or rather what did not happen. What happened? Where is that strength he used in the entrance exam? Alexander thought. The wide-eyed Midoriya straightened himself up. What gives? I was trying to use it just now. I erased your quirk, Aizawa suddenly said. Midoriya turned around and was stunned to see wraps hovering around Mr. Aizawa, while Aizawa's eyes were blood red. The judges for this exam were not rational enough. Someone like you should never be allowed to enroll at this school, he said to the green-haired boy. Confused, Midoriya said. Wait, you did what? He suddenly noticed a pair of goggles hanging from Aizawa's neck. Those goggles, I know you. You can look at someone and erase their powers. The eraser hero, Eraserhead. The class wondered who that was except a few who explained it to the others. Eraserhead was a hero who could use his quirk to cancel out other quirks. So, he can temporarily stop people's quirks? That's useful. Too bad it won't work on me, Alexander thought and smirked. Aizawa had stopped the test to give Midoriya a stern talking to. Apparently for him Midoriya's quirk was useless if it broke his body every single time, and told him he was unfit to become a future hero. Aizawa then went back to his place and waited for Midoriya's throw. Take your final throw. Ida began talking. I wonder if our teacher gave some advice. Probably told him to start packing. Bakugou said. There was no way that Deku would pass. We'll see, don't we? Alexander said, and he got yet another angry glare from Bakugou. Meanwhile, the other girl, Kikuchi, observed the green-haired boy called Midoriya. She was beginning to think that what Ida and Alexander said wasn't really true. Not to sound mean, but Midoriya was way more fragile from what she had seen so far. She was very doubtful if he was going to make it or not. But since Ida and Alexander still had faith in him from what she could tell, so she decided not to say anything. Either way, it was probably going to be solved in the next minute, so there were no reason to say anything. Midoriya was thinking up a way to complete the test without breaking his body. If he didn't, he would be thrown out. Suddenly it came to him. He had the answer he needed. Mr. Aizawa was right. There was no way he could become a hero if he did not know how to control the amount of power. But Midoriya did know where to concentrate it. He threw the ball again, and Alexander, who was standing on the sidelines along with others, had a good look at Midoriya. After years of battle, he knew that look well, and he then smiled a little appeared on his face. At the last point of contact, Midoriya channeled the energy to his right index finger, sending the ball flying at ludicrous speed through the air. The classmates began looking in awe at Midoriya's power as the ball came falling down on the ground. Midoriya's felt pain, but as bad as before. With only his right index finger burned out, he was still mobile, meaning he could still take care of himself. Aizawa looked at the phone to see the result. 705.3. Just 0.1 further away than Bakugou. Mr. Aizawa. He looked ahead to Midoriya, who was talking to him, biting his lip to beat back the pain. You see, I am still standing. Aizawa's expression was a little hard to read. He was either glad that Midoriya finished the challenge or mad as he was made that he was made to look like a fool for doubting him. Meanwhile, All Might, who was hiding in the corner this entire time, was very impressed that Midoriya was able to overcome the challenge. He was glad that the young boy had exceeded his expectations yet again. How did Midoriya become so awesome? At the sidelines, the class was already talking about the amazing display of power Midoriya showed. He threw it over 700 meters, someone said. Holy crap, Kikuchi said, awed by the display of power. So, Alexander and Ida weren't lying after all. You're a rocket cheer for Midoriya. Nice, he is finally showing us his true power. Ida observed the state of Midoriya. His finger seems to be broken now. Just like in the exam. His quirk is very odd. Agreed, look at his finger. It looks like it's burned up. Alexander said. He knew green hair wasn't quirkless. It wasn't a very pretty throw. Another boy said, but nobody really commented on his view. He had blonde hair, flamboyant personality, and a high-tech belt wrapped around his waist. Bakugou, on the other hand, was in a state of pure shock. His mouth was open wide, and eyes looked like he had just seen a ghost. What the hell was that? If Deku had a quirk, he would have gotten it when they were kids. This was impossible, Bakugou thought. Deku was up something, he had to be. His eyes narrowed at the green-haired boy and his hands started sparking with small sparks. I am getting to the bottom of this, he said and sprinted towards Midoriya. The other students didn't know what he was doing, but also did nothing to stop him. Luckily, Bakugou was then suddenly caught by Aizawa and his scarf that wrapped around Bakugou to restrain him. Aizawa's eyes gave off a slightly, which indicated he had activated his quirk to temporarily cancel out Bakugou's. Stand down, Aizawa ordered the explosive blonde boy. It would be wise to avoid making me use my quirk so much. It gives me serious dry eye. The entire class, except the demon hybrid, shouted. Too bad, that power is amazing. Is there an echo here or what? Alexander shouted after. Aizawa let go of Bakugou and told go back to the sidelines while the next stepped up. Midoriya walked over to the sidelines while Bakugou stood fuming with anger. That sword guy and Midoriya, those two are going to pay for making him look like an average Joe. He was going to crush them. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Speckters on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.